Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is William Bell, and I'm here with Don Preston. Don, are you here? Hello, Don. Can you hear me? He can't hear. Don, can you hear me? I cannot hear you. I'm not sure if you hear me. If you are able to hear me, I'm going to let you go ahead because I'm having obviously some problems with my audio. I couldn't dial in on Skype and had to try. I'm going to see if I can come in on my cell phone to continue. So if you're here, just go ahead and start. And I will sign out and try to get back in. I don't think it's showing me as having called in. Hello, Don. Can you hear me? He can't hear.
Of words. And William, can you hear me now?
I just came in. I had to dial in on the guest line. I can't get in on the host line. Well, I'm in, but it's not recognizing me. I don't know if you could hear me before. Could you?
I could hear you perfectly well. It's just that you obviously could not hear me.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I just heard a background message that says unmuted. So obviously something happened when you just came on that allowed you to speak and to be heard by me.
Well, I dialed in on a different line, so I'm in on 2 lines. I can't hear a thing on the other line,
okay.
And I couldn't dial in on Skype, so that
okay.
didn't work.
Well, as I was saying to our listeners, obviously technology is wonderful, but there are times I know that I've encountered it when I've been out of state and tried to dial in. I've encountered this problem. You've encountered it before. I don't know what there is about it, that if we're out of state, if we're in a different venue, that for some reason or other our microphones won't work. So, but it's good to have you here, William. It's really great to have you there online.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for being late. I've been trying to get in on this call since 5:30.
Yeah, that's just the way with this great technology that we've got. Again, it's wonderful when it works, and when it doesn't work, it's totally frustrating. And, William, I want to share just a little bit of news here. First of all, here we are at September the 22nd, if my calendar is correct. And, September the 13th was the end of what was known as the Shemitah. And Jonathan Cahn, who wrote a book entitled The Harbinger, and then wrote another book entitled The Mystery of the Shemitah, and in both of those books, he said that he had received a revelation from God. He didn't intend to write a book. He did not intend to say anything about this, but the revelation just came directly from heaven, and he had to share it with the world. And what he predicted was the utter catastrophic collapse of the American economic system. Now, he said that in spite of the fact that the Shemitah has to do with the Sabbath years of Israel. And even though the Sabbath laws were never given to America, even though Torah was never given to America, Jonathan Cahn claimed that the Shemitah laws and the Shemitah penalties for not observing the Sabbath years and the Sabbath laws were going to be brought to bear. And he created, these really impressive graphs, and he has sold millions of books. And I tell you, the paranoia and the fear generated by Jonathan Cahn has been absolutely incredible. One of our regular listeners, William, has been working at a financial institution, an investment institute. He resigned last week because he could no longer go along, because the owners and the managers of that financial investment group all believe in this paranoia of Jonathan Cahn and the predictions that we're in the last days, and they've been predicting this imminent demise of America, imminent collapse of America, and he is a preterist, and so he finally resigned. He just told them, I just cannot go along with this anymore. But what he was sharing with me and others online was how this entire financial institution is being dominated by the fear created by Jonathan Cahn. I mean, this is incredible. Well, I have produced, as of today, 10 videos in which I have exposed the fallacy and the falsity of Jonathan Cahn and his predictions about the Shemitah. Well, you know, what happened, William, was immediately when I began producing those videos, people began defending him. You are a false prophet. All you're doing, Mr. Preston, is attacking the man. He is a prophet of God. His predictions are true. Well, I even challenged one individual. I said, well, I tell you what, let's do then. Let's put up $500 that says on September the 14th, if and when the American financial world has not come to a catastrophic failure and collapse, you will send me that $500. Well, the guy wouldn't go along with that. He wouldn't even discuss it. He didn't even mention it after I posted it, even though he was calling me a false teacher for daring to challenge Mr. Cahn. So what happened? Well, Mr. Cahn began posting, well, the real date is not September 13th. The real ending of Shemitah is September the 23rd, because that's the Day of Atonement, and that's when the trumpet blew to announce the end of Shemitah. Well, that means that tomorrow, the Day of Atonement in the Jewish calendar, is the last day for this judgment on America and the imposition of the Shemitah judgment for America not observing the Shemitah, even though we're not under Shemitah. And here we are. There's not a sign, there's not an indication, there's not a hint of a clue of a suggestion that America's financial institutions are going to collapse tomorrow. And yet, William, it has been absolutely astounding at the attacks on me on YouTube and even on Facebook to a limited extent of the people who have adamantly continued to defend Mr. Cahn. Now, I suspect after tomorrow, the excuses will start. Well, we've actually got until October. Another excuse that has already begun, by the way, one person who attacked me as a false teacher said, you don't understand the mystery of the 2520, the 2,525 days. That's the real key, and that will come in October. And there's a website, 2520.com, in which they delineate their prediction. It's coming in October. It is absolutely astounding, and it's sad that so many people have fallen into the trap set by Mr. Kahn. And William, this morning, someone sent me a link. The guy that sent me the link is Ron Ladick, and I want to thank him personally in case he's listening for tonight. I thanked him personally at the lead-in of my video today for sending me a link in which it was reported by a gentleman who watched the program, who chronicled everything that he said, in which Mr. Jonathan Cahn was interviewed on a television show by David Reagan. David Reagan is himself a dispensationalist. He has agreed with Jonathan Cahn, but he actually began to see some problems. Not that he wanted to attack Jonathan Cahn, because he actually said, however, that if Jonathan Cahn had set the date for the ending of Shemitah at September 13th and it didn't happen, then Jonathan Cahn has to be labeled as a false prophet. Well, guess what happened, William? On the David Reagan program, with Jonathan Cahn as a guest, David Reagan pointed out that there is a humongous discrepancy between the Hebrew calendar, which Jonathan Cahn has appealed to, and the actual historical calendar. It is a discrepancy of over 250 years. Now, what's undoubtedly going to happen, William, is Jonathan Cahn will probably back up and say, you know what, folks? I was looking at the misguided Hebrew calendar. I should have been looking at the historical calendar. So the penalty for Shemitah won't be for 250 years now. Well, so he'll continue selling his books. People will continue to believe his false doctrines and false teachings. And he's, quote, off the hook. And it's just so unbelievably sad. So here we have a man, William, who has been consistently setting the date as the lead-in one of his videos, William. And let me give a backstory here. Person after person after person after person has attacked me and said, Jonathan Cahn has never set the date. He has never set the time. Jonathan Cahn knows no man can know the day or the hour. And I kept saying, Jonathan Cahn, and others know this as well and posted in response. Jonathan Cahn set September the 13th. There's no question about it. A couple of days ago, I found one of his videos, and it was Jonathan Cahn 2015, Rapture 2015, et cetera, et cetera. And in the lead-in to this video, the voiceover said that Jonathan Cahn had discovered the biblical mystery that is so precise that it set the year, the month, the day, and the very hour for these things to be fulfilled. Now, Jonathan Cahn approved that lead-in. He approved that video. He produced that video. And here is the lead-in claiming that Jonathan Cahn's revelation has revealed the year, the month, and not only the day, but the very hour when these things will be fulfilled. And so these advocates, these defenders and apologists for Jonathan Cahn have been proven wrong, are being proven wrong at every single step. Every single thing they deny has been documented. Every single thing that Jonathan Cahn has predicted has been vindicated. Proven false. I'm telling you what, it's astounding, William, how these people can nonetheless continue to defend such a man.
Well, that's quite an amazing story and development. And, you know, a person that claims that they can predict down to the very day and hour certainly should have had no problem recognizing that he was using a calendar that was off by some 250, 7 years, you said?
7 years.
Yeah. So, you know, that is a red flag, a huge red flag to even begin with, that anyone could trust a person's judgment and claim to have, you know, this knowledge and are able to predict down to the day and hour and can't even discern whether they're using the right calendar or not.
Absolutely right. And
yeah.
You know, when he said repeatedly, and I've got it underlined and highlighted in my copy of his book, The Mystery of the Shemitah, in which he said these revelations came directly from above, from heaven itself. So here's a man who claims that heaven itself gave him the revelation about the mystery of the Shemitah, but the same God of heaven who ostensibly gave these revelations didn't tell him he was using the wrong calendar. Like that's what you're saying here. Good grief, this is awful. It's astounding.
That's amazing. You know, you wonder, if God gave him the revelations as he claimed, if they came directly from heaven, he's got to be either saying that he didn't pay attention to the instructions and missed something, or that God himself gave the wrong instructions and misread the wrong calendar.
Yeah. I mean,
now, how could that be?
Yeah. Doesn't say much for the omniscient God, does it?
No, it does not.
Well, that's a little bit of what's been going on. I tell you, once I posted that video today, which is my number 10 in the series, my YouTube messages just, coming in as emails, email notices. I've been inundated all day long with messages, both negative of men and some women, absolutely condemning me for, what one fellow said, you ought to just leave him alone. The Bible nowhere calls on us to attack false teachers. And I pointed out the scriptures which tell us to test the spirits, whether they be of God, which tells us, have no fellowship with the works of darkness, but rather reprove them. Well, that's when that gentleman deserted the discussion. But it was refreshing, William. It was really refreshing to see the number of people, many of whom I have never heard of, and I certainly haven't recognized their usernames. There's some pretty creative usernames on YouTube, so I don't know that I would recognize them anyway. But I'm telling you, it was very fascinating and very refreshing to see the number of people who chimed in with me condemning Jonathan Cahn and who were making full preterist arguments. So that was really cool.
Well, that's very good. It's good to know that people are alert and astute enough to be able to share that kind of information. It shows that, you've made a tremendous amount of headway, and others are making some headway in getting this message out to people. I mean, there's just no other recourse, especially with all of these predictions about the end. I mean, we had a lot of that back in the 20th century, especially with the 1948 date and 40 years within that date, and we saw what kind of confusion that created. And, of course, it continued on through the year 2000. And then after that point, when nothing happened, they started to wane just a little bit. But now that I assume they think people have forgotten,
now they jump back on these bandwagons of predicting these dates again. But as you say, it creates such a frenzy, as well as puts a lot of money in their pocket, because people want to believe that. I've just come to the conclusion that people want to believe that there is some catastrophic end to this world. It somehow is going to validate them. I guess it's going to vindicate them and defeat all of their enemies, and they just feel like, we haven't accomplished anything if we can't see this world be destroyed. And that's where their heads are. That's where their mindset is on the subject of eschatology. They can't see the fact that, God has created a system and a plan, a redemptive plan that will continue to save man, and that will continue or continue without the destruction of the physical universe. And all of these passages that they are citing, misunderstanding, misrepresenting, failing to properly interpret and define the terms that are used that speak about the imminence of these events having occurred within the first century generation, which means that if they have in fact occurred, and they have, that you can't have this catastrophic end that people are talking about. And yet, it's just like bad news. Bad news, people spread that, more than they do the good news. And so it's sensational. Even the news media will jump on the bandwagon of the end of the world and some imminent, destruction before they will on the fact that we have a system and a world that is going to continue on, and that these events that everybody is so afraid about, and as you were talking about earlier, with the financial institution, where, they are caught up with these false predictions. And, can you imagine what kind of decisions they're making based on that? And we know from our experience that it hasn't just been the financial institutions. We've known of people who will not go to college, people who will not get married, people who will give up all their life's possessions. All of these things happen because they are under the notion that somehow it's going to come to an end. And they've done this in the past many, many times. It never has come about, and yet these people have, lost fortunes and lost their livelihoods, lost their career choices and many other things based on this false information that's out there.
Well, it's absolutely right. And, I think you hit on something there, William, that is without any question true. And that is, I think there are a solid number of people out there that are so infatuated with the idea of being able to stand back and watch, as it were. I have had people right here in Ardmore, Oklahoma, tell me that they could never accept covenant eschatology. When I've asked them why, their reason was, because I want to watch the wicked burn up. And if you're telling me that I don't get to watch them burn up, I don't get to watch them go to hell, then I don't want any part of that system. Now, that's really a Christian charitable, type of attitude. I want to watch them burn.
Yeah, it's almost like people want to gather down at the river to watch the fireworks,
Yeah, exactly right. So it's really, really sad. But, William, you touched on a point that might serve as a good segue into our discussion tonight, and our discussion of H. Howard Denham, Howard Denham, and his presentation at the but at the Bellview lectureship a couple of months ago. You took note of the fact of how they define words in ways that aren't biblical. Well, Howard Denham, who is without a doubt one of the most caustic, acerbic, hateful ministers that I've ever corresponded with, and he just seems to have no ability to communicate in a respectful, honorable, dignified manner. He thinks that since he is who he is, that he has the right. In fact, I think he feels like he has the responsibility to attack people in a ungodly, caustic manner. Because I don't know of anybody that he's corresponded with, anybody that disagrees with him even slightly. He goes in the full attack mode, calling them liar, hypocrite, thief, snake in the grass, and every other adjective that you can possibly think of. Never once considering that a person might be honestly mistaken. If you disagree with him, you're a liar. If you disagree with him, you're a snake in the grass. If you disagree with him, then there's no way that you can be honest. You are simply a dishonest individual. And by the way, you're doomed. And so it's horrible. But he gave this presentation, and the subject of his presentation was something like word studies and refutation of realized eschatology. He began his presentation by saying that the RE folks, that's how he refers to those of us who believe in covenant eschatology, RE standing for realized eschatology, the RE folks redefine and pervert and distort the definition of biblical words. And he focused on two words primarily, aion and cosmos. He mentioned the word, and he dwelt a little bit on the word aionios, the adjectival form of aion being the noun. And William, I got to tell you, for a man that declares himself to be, proudly proclaims, he has taught Greek for 30 years. He has taught logic for 30 years. Well, as I told him in one of our private correspondences, when he was bragging and trying to intimidate me with how long he had taught both Greek and logic, he said, I'll have you to know, I've taught logic for over 30 years. And I told him, I said, well, about all I can say to that, Howard, is if you taught your students to use Greek in the manner that you've just used it to me, you ought to have been kicked out of class yourself, because you have just abused and distorted logic and Greek, I might add. And so, I mean, it's absolutely horrible. And so what he did, William, did you ever get a chance to listen to any of it? William?
I did listen to some of it. I didn't listen like straight through, but I did catch a lot of it. You know, I heard pretty much most of the words that he talked about, and really just thought it was horrible in what he was doing, and very, very, very shallow. And, of course, the attitude and the spirit with which he came across was even worse.
Absolutely. Well, he made the claim that aion, he said these RE folks make the claim that aion means age. And he said, and he goes into this little, almost a tirade, saying that aion means time. And aionios means endless, without time. Well, there are certainly some places, for instance, in the book of John, in which aionion is used, I will be with you forever, aionion. So no one is denying that. But one of the things that I found so deeply disturbing about Howard Denham was that he accused us of imposing one single definition on a given word, for instance, aion, and never allowing it to mean anything else. And that is absolutely, totally false. Every single preterist that I know demands and teaches that words have a consistent usage, a primary usage, but that there are exceptions to that normal primary usage, and that we must honor those exceptions. However, an exception does not establish a new rule. It doesn't establish a new dominant definition. And so here is Howard, and by the way, he used Matthew chapter 13. And, you know, you and I talked about Matthew chapter 13 just a tiny bit before coming on the air earlier in the day. And I was just staggered, as I have been, with every single speech given by every single speaker at the Bellview lectures. I was staggered at how shallow, how awful, how unscholarly, and how uncritical the, quote, analysis of Matthew chapter 13 by Howard Denham really was. I mean, he goes there and he says, well, first of all, he defines the Greek word cosmos, and he claims that the Greek word cosmos has one meaning. He said the Greeks translated or defined the word cosmos as the material creation. Well, I just about fell out of my chair. You know, when a man is willing to stand in front of an audience and to promote himself as a scholar, to promote himself as a man who should be relied upon and trusted, you would expect the man, when he gets up there and says, the following word means the following, and at least have the integrity to say, here's the primary definition, here's a secondary, or here's a tertiary definition of the word. Only context can determine which definition that we ought to use. Well, instead of doing that, Howard Denham says cosmos means the material creation. Oh my goodness. Has he never read a commentary? Excuse me, a lexicon? Cosmos means orderly arrangement. And F.F. Bruce, commenting on 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 4, when it says the world of the wicked perished in the flood, takes careful note that the word world does not mean and does not demand material creation. F.F. Bruce pointed out that it was not the material creation. It certainly was not the sun, the moon, the stars. It was not the cosmos in Howard Denham's definition that was destroyed. And I think even Howard Denham recognizes that. William, do you know of any Church of Christ preacher that believes the sun, the moon, and the stars, i.e. the material cosmos, was destroyed in the flood?
No, I do not, and I believe that a person that Howard Denham might have respected, I can't say for sure because I don't know, but a person that he might have respected, such as Aion Woods, who wrote the commentary on 2 Peter, you know, on the epistles of 1 Peter and 1 John, I think there were several in that book, but he stated specifically it did not occur. So I would suggest to him that he goes back, especially if he's going to take this just wooden forced interpretation on the word cosmos, and as you've already defined it, according to all the lexicons that I've ever read, it is an orderly system or arrangement. None of them ascribe it particularly to the world as its primary meaning. It's an orderly arrangement. And at the same time, you know, as I said, Aion Woods took the position that on 2 Peter 3, that is not a comparison between the end of the physical universe in the time of Noah. So if Denham is going to be consistent with his interpretation, he would be forced to conclude that the physical world ended in the day of Noah, and that we are no longer living on that same earth that they were living on. He's got to absolutely just renounce everything he has stood up and so aggressively asserted in that presentation. It's just, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And as you say, go ahead. No,
I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were on roll there, and you were doing really well. Go ahead.
Well, I was just about done, but I was just going to say, I was coming to a close, and now that my thoughts are scattered, I don't even remember what I was going to say.
Okay,
well, that's all right. No, go right ahead.
Let's see. Yeah, let's see if Howard Denham's wooden definition of the cosmos will stand up. I mean, remember, folks, here's a man, and we'll get to Matthew chapter 13 momentarily, but here's a man who insists that the proper definition of the Greek word cosmos has to be material, physical creation. Well, let's see if he would stand that. Paul, writing to the Galatians, Paul says, even so when we were children, we were held in bondage under the elements of the world, cosmos. Now, William, I don't know about you, but this is a real troublesome text for good old Howard Denham, and I do know about you. Just a form of speech there. But here is Paul saying, we once were under the elements, stoicheia, of the world. Now, Howard Denham didn't get into the definition of stoicheia, but I suspect he would probably have said those are the basic elements of physical creation, earth, wind, fire, and water, as believed by the ancient Greeks. Well, they did hold that. The Greeks did, but that doesn't mean that's how the Hebrews applied that. And see, this is one of the logical fallacies that Howard was guilty of repeatedly. Here's how the Greeks viewed this word. Here's how the Greeks defined it. Here's how the Greeks this and that and the other. William, this man completely and totally overlooked the fact that many, many, many world-class scholars have noted that even though the New Testament writers used the Greek, they used it in a Hebraic context. They used it in ways that your good old Greek would not necessarily recognize or even agree with. So, for Howard to appeal to, well, the Greeks would have understood this or the Greeks would have understood that is not the point. Are Greek words being used? Yes. Do we have a primary definition of those words? Yes. They are being used by Hebraic writers, writing in the context of explaining the Old Testament, Old Covenant promises made by God to Israel. And that's something that Howard did not say literally one single word about. All of this, how Paul's eschatology and their use of cosmos and their use of stoicheia and their use of aion would have been understood by a Hebraic audience, even though it's written in the Greek. Now, is there some overlap? I'm not denying that. But as an increasing number of scholars are noting, if you take the strictly Grecian, or I would say it like this, if you take the Grecian worldview and impose it on the Greek of the New Testament, you are abusing the Greek of the New Testament. This is incredibly important. You know, men such as Richard Hayes, N.T. Wright, R.T. France, world-class scholars who I dare say know more about the Greek than good old Howard Denham, even though he's supposedly been teaching it for 30 years. These are world-class scholars, which Howard Denham does not qualify for. And these men recognize the fact that even though it's the Koine Greek, the Greek of the everyday man on the street in the first century, that the Hebrew writers, the Jewish writers of the New Testament, are filtering that Koine Greek through their Hebraic worldview. And again, folks, I cannot emphasize this enough, but Howard Denham seems to be completely and totally ignorant of this basic but essential fact. But anyway, back to Galatians chapter 4. Paul said, when we were children, we were held in bondage, were, past tense, held in bondage under the elements of the world. Now, if the elements refer to the physical earth, wind, fire, and water, and cosmos, which is the word used here in Galatians 4:4, or Galatians 4:3, excuse me, then that means that Paul is saying they were no longer subject to earth, wind, fire, and water. They were no longer in the material, physical world. I wonder how that works for good old Howard Denham. I don't think it works well at all, personally. And it refutes his definition of cosmos, but we're not done. Let's go to Galatians chapter 2. Now, I'm reading these so that I can't be accused of, just simply misquoting them or anything like that. I'm going to read Colossians 2:20. Wherefore, if you are dead with Christ from the rudiments, Greek word, stoicheia, same word back there in Galatians 4, verse 3. Now, notice, in Galatians, Paul said you once were subject to the stoicheia, not subject to them anymore. Now, Paul is writing to the Colossians and saying, you are dead to the elements. Oh, my goodness. Hey, William, they're dead to earth, wind, fire, and water. So they're totally impervious to fire. They can't feel the wind anymore. Even a hurricane wouldn't touch them. The earth, they're no longer subject to the laws of earth. And fire won't bother them at all. Earth, wind, fire, water. So they couldn't drown. And maybe they don't even need to drink anymore. Because after all, they're dead to the elements of the cosmos, the material creation, according to Howard Denham. So now, who's redefining words? Who is it that is refusing to honor context of words when he gets up and says the proper definition of the Greek word cosmos is material creation? Folks, this is absolutely atrocious that a man claiming to be a Bible scholar would get up with such arrogance, would get up with such brashness, and not even admit to his audience. I can't help but feel, William, I cannot help but feel there are probably some people in the audience who have done enough study to know, Howard, that's not quite totally accurate, what you're saying. And, how many times have we seen, William, how many times have we heard from people who have been sitting in the audience of someone who just blasted those of us who are preterists, called us heretics, false teachers, et cetera, and made their false claims about what we believe, and these certain individuals had done enough study, enough linguistic studies, enough grammatical studies, enough historical studies, and enough exegetical work to know that what was being said was not true. They had done enough research to know that the speaker was completely false, making all of these blatantly false claims, misrepresentations about what preterists believe, and so as a result, those individuals, realizing that the speaker was totally misrepresenting not only preterists but the biblical evidence, they decided to study more and wound up becoming full preterists. You and I have seen that over and over and over again.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, I'm here. Yeah, I've got a on and off button on my mic, so I try to keep that from distracting. I had to actually walk out to my car to get my charger so that my computer and my phone wouldn't cut off in the process. So it was a lot of noise with the truck and everything. But yes.
Yeah.
So
okay. Well, this has happened repeatedly in which men like Howard Denham make their make their ludicrous, unscholarly, uncritical, shallow claims, and people in the audience are going, I know that's not correct. I know that's not true. And it prompts them to study and to learn the truth for themselves. Well, William, he made the claim about aion. And he said, it just simply means time. And he said, so when Jesus and the New Testament writers, and William, he made the claim that once again is completely out of touch with modern scholarship. It's completely out of touch with what the Jews actually believed, and yet he's standing up there claiming to be an authority, claiming to be a scholar, saying when the Jews spoke of this age, they simply meant this world. When they spoke of the age to come, they were talking about after the end of time in a timeless world. So here's what's kind of amusing about this. He says aion is time, but the Jews looked forward to eternity, which is no time, and yet they called it aion.
Exactly. I mean, using the same word
in two totally contradictory ways, such as Howard Denham's scholarship. But let me make a couple points, folks. And in my book, The Last Days Identified, as well as in my book, Like Father, Like Son on Clouds of Glory, I document this extensively from scholarship and from the experts in Jewish and rabbinic writings. Folks, listen very carefully to what I'm about to share with you. The Jews only believed in two ages. It's what they called this age and the age to come, the Ha'olam Haba. What they called this age was the age of Moses and the law. What they called the age to come, listen very carefully, folks, catch the power of this. The age to come was the Messiah and the new covenant age. They believed this age would end, but the age to come, the age that would follow the age of Moses and the law, the age of Christ, of Messiah, and the new covenant would never end. But what does Howard Denham come along and do? He denies that whole thing. He says, no. This age had nothing to do with Moses and the law in rabbinic thought. Well, by the way, he didn't set out to prove that. He did not document that in any way whatsoever. I do document that in my books that I've just mentioned. But here's a problem. Here's a real problem. In Hebrews chapter 2, verse 5, he, that is God, has not put the age to come, world to come, oikoumene, the oikoumene to melusi, about to come world, inhabited world. He has not put it in subjection to angels, but of the Son, he says. And then he quotes Psalms chapter 8. Now, here's the problem with this, folks. You really, really have to tune into this very, very carefully. Howard Denham believes that at the so-called end of time, Christ surrenders his rule. He abdicates the throne. He believes that in the age to come, in other words, Christ is no longer ruling. Wait a minute. That doesn't work, because Hebrews chapter 2, verse 5 and following, says that it's the age to come that has been put in subjection unto Jesus. Not the angels, but to Jesus. That violates, contradicts, and destroys Denham's entire theology. He says, the age to come, Christ does not rule. He surrenders the throne. Turns the kingdom over to the Father, 1 Corinthians 15, 23 through 26. But then he would turn right around, has turned right around, and says the age to come is after the end of time. Oh, and it's not really age because it's timelessness, even though, it's age. So he entraps himself everywhere he turns. He contradicts his own view that Christ will surrender the throne because in the age to come, according to him, Christ surrenders that throne, but according to Hebrews chapter 2, Christ rules over the age to come. Secondly, he defines the word age, or it's the word age, and he uses the word age to come in Hebrews chapter 2, literally world in that text, I apologize, oikoumene. It's the inhabited world, but it's still, according to Howard Denham, it's still the age which is not an age. It is the age where there is no time, and so he contradicts himself on that. So once again, every single place that Howard Denham turns, he contradicts himself. Now, William, we got very, very little time here, and I don't think Howard Denham's silly, shallow presentation is worth much more time. But he goes to Matthew chapter 13. And he says, see, the gospel would be preached in all the world, and that's cosmos. That's the material creation. And he says, harvest is at the end of this world. That is the Greek word aion. Well, technically, that's not true. It is suntelia ton aion, or a cognate thereof. And that term is only used between 7 and 9 times. I've forgotten exactly at the moment, between 7 and 9 times. So it's not simply aion. It is literally consummation of the age. That's what it means. Not end of time. And here's the real kicker. Matthew chapter 13, Jesus said the harvest is at the consummation of this age. Some translations, based upon some very major Greek texts, says the harvest is at the end of this age. That's the age in which Jesus was living. Seconds. We're almost out of time. Okay. Howard Denham completely ignores the fact that Jesus in Matthew 13:43, which says, then shall the righteous shine forth, is a citation of Daniel chapter 12, verse 3. Well, Daniel 12 is a prediction of the resurrection, which is the harvest of Matthew 13. But Matthew 13, Daniel chapter 12, verse 7 says that harvest at the time of the end of Daniel 12, verse 4 would be when the power of the holy people is completely shattered. But Jesus said the harvest at the end of the age would be in fulfillment of Daniel chapter 12. Therefore, the end of the age of Matthew 13 would be when the power of the holy people is completely shattered. Howard Denham is either completely ignorant of that Old Testament background and source of Matthew 13, or if he is at least knowledgeable of that source, he completely and totally ignored it, William. Did not so much as mention it. And you know the reason he didn't mention it, because verse 7 destroys his entire eschatology. Well, folks, we're getting a cue here that we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us on this evening's Two Guys and a Bible on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. And always good to be with you. Thanks for subscribing to our program, helping us expand our listening audience. And with that, I'm going to say good night and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Dunn Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.